CTO at Delta DNA. This is an interesting space. The ads, specifically in free-to-play games, are generating, quite often something between 25 and 50% of the revenue of a free-to-play game. And having ways of increasing that, understanding your players, working out how to best target your ads, how to not impact retention, how to increase the revenue you can generate from them, how to not piss off your spenders, which we know there isn't that many of 1, 2, 3% of your players will actually spend money. How to monetize the other 95 to 97% is key, but also making sure that you do it in an intelligent way and an interesting way. So there's lots of opportunities to start to use data in this to better do ads. And I think we've probably all looked at and played free-to-play games that do this sometimes well, quite often badly, put too many ads in or don't put ads at the right place. So this seemed like an interesting panel to start to talk about it, and the objective here is to, I've got some questions, but to kind of open it up and get everybody to kind of ask questions as well. So we've got three really interesting, really good people to join us for this, so thank you for coming. And actually just get you to introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and how that fits into this panel.
Okay, yeah, I can start. I'm John Rankin. I'm Managing Director of B7. It's a retention and monetization platform. Thank you. Not leave that. Don't stick it back on, no. The retention and monetization platform for game developers actually came out of Outfit 7. So the guys much more famous than my brand behind Talking Tom and Friends. And I can hopefully give a viewpoint both from a monetization background. I've been in mobile and media monetization for around about 15 years now, before there really was anything other than GPRS-based mobile. So hopefully I can give a balance of, from a developer's point of view, game developer's point of view, and how Outfit 7 as a group uses monetization without in-app purchase, and from a platform retention and monetization solution as well.
Yeah, so my name is Stefan Ansari. I work at InMobi as Business Development Director for Europe, working with primarily game publishers in the region looking to monetize their games. So you may know InMobi. It's one of the largest global mobile ad networks with 17 offices around the world. A couple of stats, we're seeing currently just over 6 billion daily ad requests on our network, reaching about 1 billion devices on a monthly basis, and about 150 billion impressions served across the network worldwide. In terms of my background, I've been in the mobile games business for about, 15 years as well? So 13 to 15 years. I started with a small company called Macrospace back in 2002, and we were developing Java games for 2 devices. It was the Siemens SL45 and the Nokia 3410, so black and white games. Macrospace evolved into Blue Mobile through some M&A. And more recently, I've been working with a social games developer in London called Yazino. So that's it.
Cool, thanks.
And I'm Matt Jeffrey. I head up Digital Rebellion. We're a studio based out in Oxford, been around for about 24 years. We make a series of games. We've got about 10 mobile games out. We've also got mobile apps in terms of comic book readers, and we also make games on console and handheld mobile devices as well. I've been in mobile for about 6 years, so the shortest of everyone here. Before I was at Rebellion, I used to head up the European development studios for Capcom Mobile, which you probably know as Beeline. And before that, I was at Codemasters for about 5 years, and before that, I was at PlayStation for about 7 years.
Cool. So to start this off, I suppose kind of the interesting point, how do you go about, I suppose starting with that, how do you go about choosing ad networks? So it'd be interesting to kind of hear from both sides of this, what does a developer, how does a developer go about choosing who are they going to work with in providing ads?
I think the simplest and probably the most boring answer, which everyone who makes games probably knows, is we look to begin with the easiest implementation. I'll be brutally honest, every single day I get somewhere between 10 and 15 LinkedIn approaches from people saying, we have a new amazing advertising platform and we will convert your KPIs by plus 30%. And we have the smallest SDK you've ever seen and your team can implement it in one day. And that has never ever happened, neither the implementation or the return. So I've only been at Rebellion a few months, and when I got there I looked at some of our titles, and one of our titles had 13 different ad networks built into it. And the guys were spending more time updating advertising systems than they were actually updating the game. So we now have a rule, and that is we don't have more than 5 in there. And we track Facebook, so that's 1 gone, we're down to 4. And so I'm willing to try other things, I'm willing to work with new partners, and willing to try things, especially with new titles that are coming out. But in general, I will look at something that has performed well in the past and stick with that. Because if I've seen it's already working well and my team know how to implement it and support it, it makes my life a hell of a lot easier, because we work on a 21-day cycle. We have roughly 2 weeks to implement and try new features, a week of testing, and then we launch, and then we start all over again. So we really only have 10 days of code implementation, and if I give up 1 or 2 of those days to put in a new ad platform, it really has to perform.
Stefan, I mean, how do you see this?
Yeah, well, it's slightly, I mean,
Yep.
in addition to ease of implementation, I think when a game developer should be looking at basically what they're trying to achieve. So I suppose what are the ad placements that potentially you're going to use? What are the type of ad formats that are going to work for your audience, and where should you put those? And then from there, you could look at what the different types of ad networks are actually offering. So some networks are very specific on one ad format, say for example, reward and video. Others are very much interstitial heavy, and some others will offer a mix of different ad formats as well. So once you've kind of figured out how you'd like to approach it, so of course, look at the market, who's out there. I think you mentioned the number 5. We're working with a lot of companies. We're looking at working with between 3 and 5 ad networks. I think 5 is a good number. And essentially what you want to achieve is as good a fill rate as possible across your geographies. So where is your traffic coming from again? So ask your ad networks that you're speaking to where they've got good demand on their network. And then obviously look at the ECPMs that are available in those geographies. So yeah, 3 to 5 ad networks, depending on the ad formats that you want to work with, and then look at the geographies as well where your users are.
Yeah, and so full disclosure from both sides of things. Actually, Stefan's one of my suppliers. Anyway, from their side, so Outfit 7 as well. So we use their product, but we use actually 1.65 ad solutions across all of our games. That's coming down now quite because of many of the reasons that you're describing. And the big thing we're looking at now is really about fill rate. And so a lot of developers are looking the ECPM route, but actually the real growth and where we're seeing real monetization coming through from this 5 are on native solutions and video solutions. So those are the big things. And actually, a lot of those don't gobble up the same ECPM space as I used to run a big exchange as well, where you are having to make a decision on who gets that ad space. A lot of the more native solutions are creating their own ad space, so they're not competing with one another. They're additional incremental, and that's really where we, Outfit 7, we decided we had a lot of technology in-house. We had our own mediation platforms. We could have launched any type of video solution we wanted, but actually I guess the users are actually generating this extra revenue, right? So the reason why native solutions are monetizing better, and the reason why video solutions are monetizing better for us is because the user chooses on most of the occasions to initiate that engagement, and equally it's relevant content to them in the main. So kind of the user's driving that solution for you. And I guess the less in your face these things occur, the more palatable they are to that user experience as well. So you have to build that into the decision-making process as well.
I think that's really interesting. So one of the areas is the different kinds of ads that you can put. So anything from kind of banners, fashion, stishals, videos, incentivized ads, native ads. And how do you? Can you kind of talk us through how you approach that side of it? Where do you see the progress in this going down the line? Is it going to be becoming more rewarded or incentivized? Is it native? There's a lot of talk about native, but is that becoming something that's interesting? And how do you tie that into the game experience and make it a seamless experience that doesn't feel so negative? Stefan, do you want to start?
Yeah, well, I think there will potentially continue to be a mix of different ad formats. Full screen versus native placements, which can be very specific to the game itself that you're developing.
Can you give some examples of native, of how native would look within a game experience?
Yeah, so I mean, we've launched a couple of native deployments with Zepto, for example, and EA on Scrabble. So with Zepto, it was at the end of the level. Instead of where they have the small banner, they created a nice frame for an icon advert with some one line of text, for example. But it looked much more, visually. It's much more appealing and much more integrated within the layout of the game. The Scrabble example was within, I think, the leaderboard, and it was, think of, in-stream adverts that you might see on a social network. It's something like that. So the look and feel is of the app itself, but it's actually, it might have a little sponsored thing tag at the top, so sponsored with a little image and some wording behind it. I mean, we've launched native as well with a bunch of non-gaming app developers as well, more in the kind of chat and social networking area. I mean, generally we're seeing, high volumes on native. Obviously, if you're scrolling down a news feed, that's going to load quite a few ads depending on where the publisher wants to put those ads. But in general, we're still seeing the highest return in terms of eCPMs on the full screen formats. Whether it's static interstitial or video, simply because obviously they pick up so much more of the real estate in the app itself.
My answer's a little bit from both sides. When I'm putting ads into our games, when we're vending adverts in our games, we try and make sure that we do it in a way that doesn't interrupt that gaming experience, and so it feels natural to have the adverts there. Some of our village building games, if you get sent a letter or something, you can put adverts in there, so it feels not obviously intrusive, massive screens popping up. With regard to the adverts we support interstitials, we support video, we support pretty much everything because, as has been noted, it's a good revenue stream on some of our titles. When I talk about it as someone who's buying advertising and spending money to put adverts for my games into other people's apps, games primarily, it's slightly different. We only use video, and we only use non-incentivized video. And the reason being is, though it costs a little bit more, the value of the download and the chance for that download to monetize is far higher. The prime example is we soft launched the title once, and we used incentivized downloads to make people be aware of it. And it led us to originally think that we had a problem with our tutorial and onboarding, because we were seeing these huge numbers of downloads and then people instantly quitting. And the reason they're instantly quitting is they've got their free gems and didn't want to play now. So probably had a team of about 3 people spend 2 days looking at the tutorial, trying to work out what was wrong, until we realised there was nothing wrong with the tutorial. It was just the people who were getting in had no intention of ever playing this game. They'd just been given free gems to download it and instantly quit out. So yeah, it's a mix.
John?
Yeah. I think the term incentivised and non-incentivised is so 2013 now, right? It's now rewarded, and rewarded is actually good, but only if you reward the right. Dear, come on. I've projected a little bit more. Start suffering. Let me take some water. Yeah, it's rewarding is not a bad thing, and I guess you hit the nail on the head. It's if you're a buyer and you're trying to you need to encourage the right behaviours. If you reward an install, then that's not what a game developer wants to buy. It doesn't want a user to install. What it wants is retention, right? So it wants gameplay and retention. So if you reward retention and gameplay, then clearly you're going to get a much better valuable user, and that's encouraging the right behaviours. And that's what we did internally, and then launched it out. if you sort the product out, if you're looking about a monetization point of view, if you sort the product out that the advertisers are getting the right product at the back end, then clearly you're going to get a higher value from them and your own property at the back end as well, right? So as a publisher. And that's why, and you're right, the majority of the money that we're seeing coming through now is, we started on CPI, and we reward gameplay, which is the right behaviour, but actually still rewarding people to view videos and having the install completely separate. If you want to, just go ahead. That's where we're seeing 70-80% of the money coming through, and there's a big reason for that. That's globally from thousands and thousands of developers that I speak to during the year as well. So there's a lesson to be learned from all those, I think.
Cool. So this is analytics. So we've been doing, we've been doing a bit of work on just looking at some of the stuff and looking at how people are trying to understand what when you should show ads. And a lot of certainly all of our clients, our customers are doing relatively simple things. They're holding back serving ads initially. They're really trying to wait until we've got some of the spenders, most of the spenders, to start spending money, and then they're targeting the ads at the non-spenders. So I suppose I'm interested in understanding how do you go about using analytics data and the data, the behavioral data that you can collect to actually better target players within the game and try and keep them, actually work out both when you should show an ad and how often you should show an ad. Matt? Do you do?
Yeah,
what do you do in that?
That's the million-dollar question. I think it's experience. I think it's trying, and think of it as basic cohorting. So at the beginning, we used to talk about people who spent money and people who didn't spend money, converters versus non-converters, and then it became converters who spent more than X in a week versus those who spent Y in a week. And we all understand the buckets and the loops of how we're trying to move people through those. Well, try and do the same thing when it comes to your advertising. So on the basic level, I think most people go, if it's a free-to-play game and you've spent money, we won't show you adverts. And if you look at something very, very simple and fun like Crossy Road, I think it did it very, very well. That's an entire game that's basically monetized just through adverts. If you look at something like Blockshot, which has done very well as well, it's another game that people had no need to spend money in it. There's no actual monetization in it. The only monetization is if you spend 99 cents, you get rid of the adverts. So there is that at a very basic level. I think in a more advanced way is look at how people are spending and what kind of adverts are you showing them. So if I have someone who is playing my game and converting and spending money on a regular basis, if I show them an advert about maybe a currency deal or an item sale, is that actually an advert? Well, effectively it is. It's telling them about something that they could also be spending money on, but it's not maybe telling them about a separate game or something like that. So there are lots of ways you have to think about how you target those ads and why you target those ads. I've got some games that have no adverts in at all because we just don't think adverts will work in those games. I've got experience of working on games where we had incredibly high DAUs but very low revenue. So we decided that we'd show a lot more ads in those because if we've got 1 million people playing every day, it's fine to show them some adverts because we're giving it to them for free and we're not asking for money out of them in any other way. I think each game, each experience has a different way of looking at it, and you basically have to try, see what works, and kind of go with your gut to begin with, and then learn from your past experience and move forward.
Stefan?
Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of learning, and each game is going to be different, and each developer publisher's approach is potentially going to be different as well. I think you mentioned that the initial approach is to say let's not serve ads to buyers, for example, and where analytics comes in, for example, is to define that threshold where we can say, well, this user is probably never going to be a buyer. Whether it's 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month, I don't know. That again will vary on a case-by-case basis. And then we work with some companies, for example, who will say, well, I only want to show this certain ad format. I only want to show a rewarded video because it's a pull format. It's not in your face. People will go and find it. They appreciate it's potentially enhancing to their experience. So we're only going to do rewarded video. And we're only going to show rewarded video option to a certain segment of our user base. And in this case, for example, this company was saying we're only going to show it to people who have exceeded 500 sessions in the game, so fairly engaged users. And what they achieve with that, for example, is that these very engaged users are actually engaging very much with rewarded video as well. So instead of getting one rewarded video view per user per day, they're getting maybe 3 or 4. So, and those users are very, very targeted in that sense. The conversion rates are then much higher, so they can drive much higher CPMs, etc. So the click-through rates and conversions through that format work very well for them. You could also argue that they're showing it to 20% of the users. They could show it to 80% and they can make more money, but that's one thing. Other developers we talk to say, well, again, we're not going to show it to buyers, but we'll cap interstitial full screen format to 2 per day per user. And again, that's a call that this company makes based on potentially maybe some data that they'll be looking at and crunching internally, and so forth. So, like you said, it's $1 million question. I don't think there's any golden rule. It's about figuring out, the balance between, potentially user experience, and again, analytics will help you figure out, well, if I show 5 interstitials per session, what's the impact on retention, and so on. If I showed, 2 per day, again, what's the impact either way? So really, it's trial and error. But at the end of the day, there's, as we're saying here, there's obviously a lot of potential to make a significant amount of money from advertising.
Yeah, good analytics tool to work it out, Chris. That's probably what the answer
Sounds
is.
like a good answer. Carry on.
I think 2 easy things to do, I guess, is just as you said, payers, no. Anything that user chooses to interact, yes. That covers everything, because then you're not annoying anybody. You don't really need to do that much analytics. You're earning as much as possible. And then the third option, which is anything that happens to be pushed into your audience, then I guess it's temperance. But that's where it's impossible for anybody in this room to say this is exactly what I do, because it won't be the same in your game. And then it is just so much QA and A/B testing. Outfit 7, I joined the company about a year ago, and I spent a lot of time with the QA guys. And obviously, I'm trying to get new products into our own inventory first before we launch it out to the wider market. And there's a team of 30-40 QA guys just on ad base and how it affects retention and things like that. So it's a really, really big job, but it won't be the same in any game, let alone every game.
Cool. So I'd quite like to open this up a bit and see, has anybody got any questions that they'd like to?
Well, sure, on the last point, it's very interesting. So, particularly that sort of third case of sort of institutional stuff that you push to the user, it's a big question of what's a good frequency. It seems like a good case of what we, as data scientists, call reinforcement learning. Where you sort of try to adaptively tune a frequency for a player based on their previous engagement and so on. Have you had any experience with that sort of thing?
Go ahead. Go on. You look.
Yeah, no, we don't go. Mine isn't into that. Yes, Outfit 7, but no, I'm not qualified to probably talk on that one.
I mean, it's tough to say, right? So there's situation. It depends on the placement as well and where it is. But I think potentially when we look at let's say forecasting what the number of ad requests per user per day coming through a potential app that we might be working with, we take a number between 2 and 4, let's say, per user per day. That's ad requests. So again, impressions, depending how far the user gets into the game, etc. Again, could be less or more than that. But these are the kind of average. I don't know if that helps, but
They're certainly not the figures that we.
It's a very complicated area. I know there's lots of sort of analytic stuff there.
Yeah.
Frequency seems like one thing you could do.
And A/B testing will hopefully give you some answers, of course.
I think it really just comes down to doing some A/B testing, and as I said, start broad and try and funnel into what you actually want to do at the end. And every game will be different, and every group will be different. And I've probably worked on 20 or 30 mobile games in the last few years, and I don't think I could ever say that we've just had 1 template that we just dropped on every game. Everything gets moved around and everything gets changed. But that's what part of soft launch is for. That's what your first few months are. It's looking at how your game's performing and what you can tweak and what you've got right, and more often than not what you've got wrong, and trying to fix that.
No, I guess one of the difficulties, I think you've mentioned, is trying to run lots and lots of A/B tests to try many parameters is just kind of massive drain on resources. Whereas, I guess if you try and do something personalised, and sort of course, I don't know if there's a third party that provides this as a solution, but something which is much more personalised and explores that parameter space adaptively, it seems like a good use case for that.
But then if you killed someone, it's too late.
Well, but you obviously explore that space with small probability, and you play safe as much as possible.
Yeah, so it's personalised. You get people there.
Stepping into sort of segmentation area, like defining novice players separately from expert players, and how they respond to in-app purchase versus app consumption, and finding some interesting results from those views of the player base, and certainly finding quite big differences in how people perceive that. I seem to perceive that as being gameplay, so that it doesn't affect the retention rates. Some people actually look for the ads to boost their resources, to get those rewards, extend the gameplay, where they don't particularly want to spend money perhaps, or they want to balance that experience.
Trying to identify sort of how early you could get enough meaningful value or data from the user to sort of ramp up.
I think
Well, it's starting simple and then layering it.
Yeah,
So
so
you
start cautious and learn as much as you can.
and then you layer over different filters so you start to get more that's
But as you say, though, I think this is an ideal kind of use case for machine learning, for the ability to actually do kind of programmatic learning and understand what's going on and then evolve it, because you can very much kind of build something that is very specific around the game, and you can start to identify those behaviors and then start to, you've got to be careful obviously, because you don't want to be, you don't want a system to go off and then decide actually this user needs 100 ads, because that would be a bad thing. But you can certainly start to use some of those techniques to drive this.
So I've been doing a little bit of research to different ad companies and stuff, and what I've seen is that there's no one company that's strong across the globe. And then what you guys were saying about having 3 to 5 companies, do you then split that up by like platform and geography? Like, do you use a different 5 in the UK and US, or?
It depends on what we're trying to do, and it depends on what we're trying to target. I would wish I could just say, when you're using these countries, you use these people, and when you're using these countries, you use these people, and make it really easy for everyone. But sadly, it doesn't work that way, because different games have different impacts, different marketing campaigns have different effects, different targeted audiences react in different ways. And again, just to hop back to the previous question, it is a lot about starting wide and funneling in. So we will probably start with a smaller ad spend during maybe a soft launch, just to see how things perform. Everyone has it. You'll suddenly discover that one country, maybe Facebook pickup is 50 times higher than the other country, and you have no idea why. You'd love to say it's because of something specifically done, but no, just for some reason, maybe the marketing or the video or something has performed very well. What I think is interesting, and I think people have to be very aware of, is, I think all 3 of us have mentioned, we think the biggest growth and strength is in video, and what that means is you've got to make good videos, and you've got to have people who can make good videos. Now, I'm lucky, I have an entire creative team who make videos for console games and put stuff on YouTube and stuff all the time, so we're used to it. For smaller companies, if you're just giving some assets over to an ad agency and saying, can you knock me up a video for this? They will, because that's their job. But it may be worth your while thinking, could I do this in-house better, or is there a specific agency who can make me that 15, 20-second video clip because it does work well. And when you get a video that performs well, you'll actually see incredibly low CPIs as well.
It's funny, I'm in a situation where we're trying to cut costs on the production of marketing assets while spending 100,000 or 200,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Which now, thinking about it, to your point, it's kind of crazy. But yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Do you see, great, this primarily for advertising in your own games, do you see great variability over time, how different networks perform? How do you deal with that variability?
Go on.
What was the?
Yeah,
I missed that.
obviously,
Do
we did see different ad networks perform differently over time, and that obviously, will have an impact. When I look at the launch, let's say the first 3-week launch of Game X, and I look at all my different ad agencies and see which ones perform for CPIs and things like that. When I'm launching Game Y, I probably am going to spend a bit more of my budget with the ones who did really well, because they did well. What's most important though to me is actually looking at the users they acquired, how they did. So there's no point in saying, look at us, we've had a CPI of $1 and we got you X number of installs, but how much money did they spend? Did any of them stay and spend? No. I would much rather have a slightly higher CPI and get quality users.
Well, coming from both sides, that's exactly. I mean, you filter down anyway, don't you? It's, whether if you're running huge user acquisition campaigns, clearly you're going to go on legacy information once you've been through the hard labour of picking through the ones. But I guess what also happens, of course, because we're all developers in this room, is and we're all buying users on your traffic, is that if you're swapping around ad networks, that's what causes the fluctuations probably, where you're one's shutting down an SDK, putting another guy in, and suddenly you've moved the user from one ad network to another one. So it's never quite how it seems to be. So it can bobble around a little bit, but that's why I guess big user acquisition teams should, in theory, be on it at all times, using quite a mass scale, starting even fairly slow, depending on what they want to do. Actually, there's a lot of push to top of App Store type campaigns, and if you're going to do something like that, then clearly incentivised, especially on Google Play, is something you don't want to start doing, but definitely start looking at retention. But yeah, if you're measuring the right things, then be fleet of foot, I think. And if you've got connections, a good UA team with connections over a number of different networks, you can move stuff around very, very quickly.
It potentially also depends on the size of your budget, right? So if you've got a lot of money to spend, potentially you're going to need a number of networks to spend that money on, unless you're really going to increase your CPIs by a factor of X. You're going to find a situation where you can't spend that money on maybe 1 or 2 networks.
Then you come to.
Then you come and talk to us.
How do you leverage virality to decrease the direct cost of acquisition?
How do you
leverage virality to decrease the cost of direct acquisition? Sorry.
Did you get that? Yeah.
The most obvious way is always make sure you have enough cross-promotion solutions in your own game. Once you've bought one, you may as well flog your next game to the next guy, right? And by the way, one cross-promotion solution is not enough in your game, beyond doubt. And we know that because we're a very successful game developer and we use several different ways. Some people will react to some ad formats and placements, and some will react to another one. If you only use one, you'll only get a few percentage of that. So maximise the cross-promo opportunities at all costs. Then it's all into the game design, right? With social, I would have thought, and the mechanics of how you get people to invite and.
And then there's marketing and PR and there are community events and having community competitions to design the best looking village or set out the nicest river or stuff like that, and engaging with your community, and that's how sometimes things become a bit more viral and break out. But trying to manage a viral campaign is really hard because by its nature it's a bit viral.
And it takes time, obviously time and continuous effort. You've got to keep working at it all the time in terms of your social media presence, what you do with it, some of the things Mark mentioned. But then also in game, John mentioned, how do you use those invite techniques, and how do you get your friends into the game? How do you get people to connect through Facebook? Does it help? What we hear is that it does to a certain extent, not the way it used to a few years ago, but it still adds a bit of a viral element and distribution to your game.
Go and check out. There's a really good Israeli company out there called Jelly Button, with a game called Pirate Bash, and the guy there that started the UA very, very well, and in the marketplace they've had more success with virality than anyone else. But go and download Pirate Bash just and see what they do. Everything is based around, for virality anyway, is based around the Facebook piece, and it's quite intense. Other than that, our game developers really do find that sort of head-on-head battle, leaderboard style thing, creates a place where humans want to be better than the other guy. So that's what we use quite a lot out for 7 anyway.
And be creative. Be as creative as you can. I heard a story about a publisher who went to people who have a lot of followers on YouTube, hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube, paid them money instead of paying for CPI downloads, paid them money to promote the game and to compete between each other on YouTube and post videos about these competitions. Generated quite a lot of traffic just from that.
Cool. We've got one more question, I think. Anybody got any more questions? Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the panel.
If you have a burning desire to talk on a topic, you want to be involved in our sort of newsletters and information, contact us through events@deltadna.com, and we've got a LinkedIn group as well for these sorts of conversations online. So thank you once again for showing up. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.